Pride and Prejudice, chapter 5, second video. Second paragraph there. Lady Lucas was a very good kind of woman, not too clever to be a valuable neighbour to Mrs. Bennet. Be careful here. Not too clever to be a valuable. So it means that not too clever to be. What does it mean? It means try to understand first. It means that because she was not too clever, she was a valuable neighbor to Mrs. Bennet. The idea here is Mrs. Bennet is not very clever, right? She's not very smart. And then a very smart person wouldn't be a good neighbor because look at Mr. Bennet, right? Of course, he is Mrs. Bennet's husband, right? So they're together. But, as a neighbor, if they weren't like husband and wife, he would never talk to her, right? He would offend her all the time because he's too clever, right? Now, not Lady Lucas. Lady Lucas is just as Mrs. Bennet, right? Not too clever. And then, therefore, she is a valuable neighbor to Mrs. Bennet. They had several children. The eldest of them, a sensible, intelligent young woman about 27, was Elizabeth's intimate friend. That the Miss Lucases and the Miss Bennets should meet to talk over a ball was absolutely necessary. In the morning after the assembly, brought the former to Longbourn to hear and to communicate. Remember the former and the latter. Remember English has these expressions, right? So we're talking about the Miss Lucases and the Miss Bennets. The formers are Miss Lucases. The latter are Miss Bennets. By the way, take a look at how interesting the plural is formed here, right? So we have one Miss Lucas, two Miss Lucases, one Miss Bennet, two Miss Bennets. To communicate. You began the evening well, Charlotte, said Mrs. Bennet with a civil self-command to Miss Lucas. You were Mr. Bingley's first choice. Keep in mind here self-command is self-control. Okay, but then my question is self-control. Self-control. Why does she need self-control in order to tell one of the Lucas's miss there that she's nice, that the guy danced with her? Why does she need self-control? Answer. Well, probably she doesn't want to compliment Miss Lucas, right? She doesn't want to say, oh, how nice, Mr. Bingley chose you first, What does she want to say? This is a question for you. The answer is, she wants to say, look at my daughter! Mr. Bingley danced twice with her, and that hardly happens, right? Nothing else matters, All that matters is that my daughter danced twice with Mr. Bingley. She wanted to say that, but she had self-command, and that's why she went. You began the evening well, Charlotte, she said Mrs. Bennet with a civil self-command to Miss Lucas. You were Mr. Bingley's first choice. Yes, but he seemed to like his second better. Ah, you mean Jane, I suppose, because he danced with her twice. To be sure, that did seem as he admired her. Indeed, I rather believe he did. I heard something about it, but I hardly know what. Something about Mr. Robinson. Okay. Be alert here, be careful, because She knows exactly what happened with Mr. Robinson and the things she heard, right? But again, she doesn't want, to brag about her daughter. So I heard something about Mr. Robinson, some rumor. Perhaps you mean what I overheard between him, Mr. Bingley, and Mr. Robinson. Did not I mention it to you? Mr. Robinson's asking him how he liked the Meryton assemblies, and whether he did not think there were a great many pretty women in the room, and which he thought the prettiest. And his answering immediately to the last question, "Oh, the eldest Miss Bennet, beyond a doubt. There cannot be two opinions on that point." So it's not something that Mrs. Bennet would just, I think there was a story, but I already forgot. Of course, she knows the story by heart. "Upon my word, well, that is very decided indeed. That does seem as if, but however, it may all come to nothing, My overhearings were more to the purpose than yours, Elisa. Keep in mind, more to the purpose here is more relevant, okay? More helpful," said Charlotte. "Mr. Darcy is not so well worth listening to as his friend, is he? Poor Elisa, to be only just tolerable," because remember that's what Mr. Darcy said of Easy, right? "I beg you will not put it into Lizzie's head to be vexed by his ill treatment, for he is such a disagreeable man, that it would be quite misfortune to be liked by him. Mrs. Long told me last night that he sat close to her for half an hour without once opening his lips." "Are you quite sure, ma'am? Is not there a mistake?" said Jane. "I certainly saw Mr. Darcy speaking to her." "Aye, because she asked him at last how he liked Netherfield, and he could not help answering her. I mean, he could not avoid. He had to answer her, right? He asked him a direct question. But she said he seemed quite angry at being spoke to." Remember that nowadays, using standard English, he seemed quite angry at being spoken to instead of spoke to. "Miss Bingley told me," said Jane, "that he never speaks much unless among his intimate acquaintances. With them he is remarkably agreeable." Keep in mind that there is an interesting meaning for acquaintance here, because apparently it is being used as somewhat a synonym for friend, right? Because intimate. Nowadays, you would use acquaintance for a person you just know. He's not my friend, he is an acquaintance, right? When you make acquaintances, you get to know people. Right? So with them, but here, of course, it seems that it's like friend. Because with them, with his intimate acquaintances, he is remarkably agreeable. "I do not believe a word of it, my dear. If he had been so very agreeable, he would have talked to Mrs. Long. But I can guess how it was. Everybody says that he is eat up by pride." Look, another thing, right? In traditional modern English, standard English, not everybody says that he is eat up with pride. What would be the standard way of saying it? Answer: he is eaten up with pride. Okay? Remember, the construction for passive voice is verb to be in the third form. "And I dare say he had heard somehow what Mrs. Long does not. So, sorry, and I dare say he had heard somehow that Mrs. Long does not keep a carriage, and had come to the ball in a hack chaise. Keep in mind that hack chaise is a rented carriage, alright? Of course, if you don't have your own carriage, right, you're not going to be seen with good eyes. Just hack is a horse used for riding, or can be a horse for hire. You know, you can hire a horse. I do not mind he is not talking to Mrs. Long, said Miss Lucas, but I wish he had danced with Elisa. Another time, Lizzie, said her mother, I would not dance with him. If I were you, no, I would not dance with him if I were you. I believe, man, I may safely promise you never to dance with him. His pride, said Miss Lucas, does not offend me so much as pride often does, because there is an excuse for it. One cannot wonder that so very fine a young man, with family, fortune, everything in his favor, should think highly of himself. If I may so express it, he has a right to be proud. Right? Why? Because he is really rich, he has a nice family, all of that. So it would be ugly if he was very proud, being, I don't know, ugly, poor, and belonging to a bad family. What do you think of that? Please answer. Well, you can say that's absurd. That's okay, because nowadays we think it's absurd, right? That just because the guy is rich, he has the right to be proud, just because he has a nice family. And what is a nice family anyways, right? But let me put another situation for you. What if there is this guy, he's incredibly well at playing ping pong, you know? And he's incredibly well, right? Nobody can beat him. Right, so he gets at the party. I don't know, there's a get-together, people are playing ping pong, and he gets there and says, people, please, I'm very sorry, but I'm going to humiliate all of you guys because I play ping pong very well. So, okay, now silence and please appreciate the king, right? That's quite annoying, right? But what if a guy enters the room and he does the same thing and he's not that good? You know, he wins maybe half of the times, but he's not that good. My question for you is, would you feel the same level of annoyance with those two guys? That's just a question I leave there to you. And then Elizabeth continue. Elizabeth answered, right? That is very true, that maybe he has a right to be proud, replied Elizabeth. And I could easily forgive his pride if he had not mortified mine. And this is interesting. Is she being ironic here, or is she being completely self-aware? You know? What do you mean by that? Because, you know, you don't tell yourself that you don't like a person just because the person offended you, you know? Because otherwise you won't be able to offend the person. Because you will admit that the only reason why you don't like the person is because the person did something to you and you are hurt, right? So my question is she being ironic, or does she have self-awareness? She knows she doesn't like him because of the offense, but yes, maybe Mr. Darcy has a right to be proud, right? So if she is self-aware, then we're talking about a self-awareness that you can just get by either practicing and refining yourself a lot to be able to to admit certain things to yourself, or the kind of quality that just comes with nature. Some people are naturally true to themselves, you know. Next video I'll tell you a story, and I think it can illustrate that very well.